for today is Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, and very integral um, band or performer. If you're just talking about Smokey Robinson and Smokey Robinson, the Miracles, they're really known for what we just briefly just talked about is the record label Motown and the Motown genre. They really helped pioneer that, and really at its core, it's definitely R&B influenced. If we go through the timeline, you can, it's very clear, but starting to get into this sort of post rock and roll or sound that was forming alongside of rock and roll that was known as soul, and so it definitely has those soul elements, those elements of gospel that kind of really makes characterizes soul music in a lot of ways. But at its core, it's definitely R&B. But what sets it apart a little bit is just this formula that Motown really came up with. This that really, kind of shifts it from R&B into the pop music genre. It's really a pop music formula um, that's based in R&B. You can think about the business side when you're talking about pop music, the industry side. But the core at its core, it's really R&B. So Smokey Robinson, also known as William Robinson, he got his nickname from his uncle, apparently due to his apparent love of Western movies or shows. And around in his high school years, around 18, he formed a vocal group with Ronnie White, Pete Moore, Bobby Rogers, and Bobby Rogers' sister, Claudette Rogers. And they were at the time called Five Chimes, later the Matadors. And while they were touring, they met Berry Gordy, who was, became their longtime manager. And that same group was eventually renamed the Miracles, Smokey Robinson, the Miracles. So this went through all these name changes, but same group as time went on. And their debut single, Got a Job, was actually a response to the Silhouettes hit Get a Job, which was released on Chess Records. And so in 1959, Berry Gordy opened what would eventually be known as Motown Records, with the Miracles being one of the first acts that he signed. And the Miracles song Shop Around became the label's first major hit as it reached number one on the R&B charts. And this song was really also kind of that base formula for the Motown sound. If you go back and listen to that song, you can really see that you can really, considering the timing, you can definitely see why that's the basis and how that's the basis. Not that it's necessarily hugely different, but most of it's due to the setting. This is the Miracles, Smokey Robinson, and you got Berry Gordy. And, Smokey Robinson continued to write a lot of successful hits for himself and the band, and he's known for his signature voice. He has a unique high range falsetto voice, but he also was a primary writer for the label. And so you can see why, this was a huge part of the formula, because Smokey Robinson was the writer of, one of the original hits, and continued to write and be the primary writer for Motown, along with Berry Gordy, kind of, the manager and guiding things along and bringing all this different talent, scouting all this different talent, and crafting the house band and everything that went into that. And Smokey Robinson went on to write top hits for groups like Soul Music, and My Guy, Two Lovers, You Beat Me to the Punch by Mary Wells. Let's see, he wrote My Girl, It's Growing, Get Ready, and The Way You Do the Things You Do by The Temptations, Don't Mess with Bill, and The Hunter Gets Captured by the Game, The Marvelettes, I'll Be Doggone, which he co-wrote, that particular by Marvin Gaye. And in addition to those, he also wrote for other big artists at the time, like Aretha. He wrote songs that were later recorded by artists that were well known, like Aretha Franklin and the Beatles and Luther Vandross. And so during this whole time, Smokey Robinson is still actively recording and performing himself with the Miracles. And in 1967, things began to slow down a little bit. And at this point, Smokey Robinson had also taken a role as vice president of the label. So he was, had a lot of business obligations as well as family obligations. He eventually married Claudette, the member in his band. And so things were, he was busy with other things, so things slowed down in addition to the actual career and music slowing down. But then in 1970, the song that was written, Tears of a Clown, was written with Stevie Wonder, became a big hit. And of course, Stevie Wonder is, guys like Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder especially, he was within that Motown record and umbrella. I believe he worked mostly for a sub label, but he was in that Motown record umbrella, and those musicians really did a lot more of their own recording and writing, and they had more freedom in that light versus some of the other musicians, which you can definitely hear to some extent. I mean, some of it is just the product of the time, that Motown sound, that's general soul sound. Some of that's just a product of the time. But you can also hear some of these other artists like Stevie Wonder, of course, specifically. We'll talk about in a little bit how he's clearly has a different sound and some different musical goals and style than the rest of the Motown label. In 1972, Smokey Robinson left the group. He wanted to launch a solo career, and he was still working at this time as a executive for Motown Records. And in 1975, his hit Quiet Storm released on the album also called Quiet Storm, and that really put him once again in front and center of the Motown sound. And Quiet Storm, as some of you may know, also created its own subgenre. It's like a niche subgenre called Quiet Storm. If you ever look into it, listen to that song, and then you can still find Quiet Storm songs. It's definitely a niche genre, even at the time, but I think even now, it'd be hard pressed to find a whole lot of songs referred to as Quiet Storm.